Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 20 meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Dish?
Here.
Councilmember Harrison?
Here.
Councilmember Song?
Here.
Councilmember Watson?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Iyer? Absent. Councilmember Ackman?
Here.
Councilmember Briggs?
Here.
Councilmember Cornell?
Here.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Ackman, seconded by Councilmember Cornell. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? The agenda is approved. We have communications today from our city administrator.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to take a few minutes to make some comments relative to our recovery from our recent storms. February 22nd was the ice storm. We had 528 requests for our forestry service. To date, 375 of those, or 71%, have been closed, leaving 153 that are still outstanding. The March 3rd and 4th snowstorm, we received an additional 456 forestry service requests. To date, 225, or 49% of those are closed. And when you combine what's outstanding between both storms, we have 384 pending requests that we're still trying to address. The city collected 215 tons of material the week of March 6th of this year. That compares to only 98 tons for the same week in March of 2022. Collections for the month to date are 342 tons, and we have expended $50,000 in order to achieve that. We still have a volume problem, and we need to take various measures to address it. Compost collection will begin 1 week earlier than planned and start the week of March 27th. Residents will be able to place carts, bags, and bundled material consistent with our curbside guidelines 1 week earlier than planned. This effort provides residents, allows residents to place materials for collection in the areas field crews have already been through. So we've started the work. We realize we've got a massive effort in front of us. When we start this sweep through, we will go back where we have been previously, is the point I'm trying to make. Residents, not private contractors or landscapers, can bring material to the city's compost facility that's managed by We Care Denali at 4170 Platt Road. The 1 cubic yard per day limit will be waived through the close of business on April 17th. We have also extended the contract with Davey Tree Expert Company with an emergency purchase order of $200,000. For full transparency with the council, I have signed that to keep the work going rather than stopping it until we could get the contract to council. We are modifying our approach by utilizing equipment that will remove large brush piles from the curbside area, leaving only chippable material behind. So what we mean is, in simple terms, we'll use a claw to pick it up, which will allow us, again, to go faster. We have also contacted 3 additional companies and are trying to determine if they can help us to expedite the issue. We estimate that it will take another month to make our way through the city. We are strongly encouraging residents to bundle per the guidelines. We will only be able to make one full sweep through the city. Residents will still be able to stage debris for pickup through the city's residential composting program, but it too must meet the curbside guidelines. We believe we will need to expend a total of $750,000 in order to complete the sweep. And I'll just say for the record, I support expending those funds, and we will bring requisite contracts to council as soon as we can get them ready. But we need to keep the daily effort going. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have an introduction with respect to Social Work Month. Folks would come on up. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Ann Arbor is, of course, a community that you can scooch on up to get in frame. Perfect. Ann Arbor is, of course, a community of cares and a community that works hard for its residents, for its community members. And no one cares more and no one works harder than social workers here in Ann Arbor, across Michigan, and goodness, anywhere else. And so March being Social Work Month, it is my delight to issue this proclamation. Whereas March 2023 is indeed Social Work Month, whereas social workers enter the profession because they have a strong desire to empower individuals, families, communities, and our nation to overcome issues that limit individuals' full potential. And whereas social workers have worked for more than a century to improve and enhance the well-being of all people and follow a code of ethics that calls upon them to fight injustice. And whereas social work as a profession has upheld institutions of oppression and discrimination as most professions have, but with the help of our code of ethics, they strive to dismantle inequity within our profession and within society. Whereas social workers positively touch the lives of millions of Americans each day in schools, hospitals, military, child welfare agencies, community centers, and state, federal, local government. Whereas social workers are the largest group of mental health care professionals and providers in the United States, and they help dismantle inequity through work in policy, community organizing, and research. Whereas social workers have bettered our nation by focusing on intersectionality and advocating for equal rights for all marginal populations. Whereas the social work profession is one of the fastest growing careers in the United States, with approximately 708,000 social workers today and more than 60,000 expected to enter the profession over the next decade. Whereas Ann Arbor and Greater Washtenaw County have benefited from the service and focus on alleviating inequity that social workers in leadership positions provide. Now, therefore, I, Christopher Taylor, Mayor of Ann Arbor, in recognition of the numerous contributions made by social workers to our community, proclaim the month of March 2023 as National Social Work Month and call upon all community members to celebrate and support the social work profession.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah. That's for you, and by all means.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. My name is Dwayne Brezak, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Association of Social Workers Michigan Chapter and an alum of the University of Michigan. So I'm glad to be home. I'm honored to be here with you all today on behalf of Michigan's nearly 30,000 social workers and 6,500 students in schools of social work across our state. It's especially exciting for me to be here in home of my alma mater. And Ann Arbor is host to the #1 school of social work over the last decade at the University of Michigan. You can just look around the county and see the impact that social workers have had in so many of the sectors that we work in developing leaders in behavioral health, nonprofit management, politics, research, and clinical practice. I'd like to recognize this amazing social worker who's next to me today, who is Beth Angel, who's the Dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. As we look around Ann Arbor, social work is everywhere. You may not know it's social work, but we are here, often behind the scenes or sometimes in front of the scenes, but maybe not with the label. From our national leading hospital system to the University Spectrum Center, the Jim Toy Community Center, our VA system, and the dozens of mental health clinics across the city. And even here on our city council, we have 2 MSWs with council members Ghazi Edwin and Song, so on our board here. If we expand that out just a tiny bit further, Washtenaw County is rich in social work leaders, including the newest mayor of Ypsilanti, Nicole Brown, and the hundreds of future social workers coming out of Eastern Michigan University. Social workers are leading behavioral health efforts in the community mental health system and expanding community relations in the sheriff's office in Washtenaw County. So some places you may not expect to see our folks. And on the Washtenaw County Commission, we also have a social worker, Justin Hodge. And at the state level, representing Ann Arbor, we have 2 MSWs with Carrie Reingans, our newest elected rep, and Felicia Brabeck in this county. And then at the state Senate level, we have Senator Stephanie Chang, who got her MSW right here in Ann Arbor. So our social work community is rich and has ties to this Ann Arbor community. Social work, as stated in the proclamation, we're rooted in empowering individuals, our communities, and our organizations that we work with. And we make sure to look at the intersections of micro, meso, and macro level work. As the fastest growing field in the United States, we know that we will just continue to expand our impact here in the Ann Arbor community. And so on behalf of our social work community here in Michigan, I just want to thank you all again for doing this proclamation and recognizing the essential work that social workers are doing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to public comment reserve time. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers at public comment reserve time have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Online, our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. Here in the room, the clock will do the same. Speakers will, of course, in each case have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Speakers are not allowed to delegate their time to others, nor are they allowed to share their time with others. Our first speaker today is Larry Yonk.
Greetings. I am Dr. Larry Junk, a citizen of Ann Arbor, here to speak in favor of Resolution 230382. I favor asking our city to explore moving away from DTE as a supplier of fossil gas and toward alternative suppliers that will partner with Ann Arbor as the city steadily moves towards phasing out fossil fuels and moves towards carbon neutrality by 2030. I'm a professor at University of Michigan Medical School, speaking on my own accord, but also as a volunteer for Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action. My scientific training provides a foundation for understanding the effects of climate change on our world, and my medical training provides a foundation for understanding the health risks. To quote leading climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe, the difference between a higher versus lower emissions future is nothing less than the survival of our civilization. I am most concerned about the following problems caused by climate change: increasing direct heat deaths, extreme weather events causing flooding in Detroit and elsewhere, the unusual occurrence of 3 major hurricanes in the U.S. in the past year, widespread drought such as that affecting the western U.S., unprecedented loss of species, and threats to our agriculture and food supply. As a physician, I'm concerned about the ongoing and severe health consequences of air pollution at present, also of mosquito-borne illnesses such as West Nile virus at present, and the threat of malaria returning to the U.S. in the future. In recent years, we have learned that the burning of fossil gas is a worse problem than previously known. One reason is that its drilling, fracking, transportation, and use in our homes releases substantial amounts of unburned methane, the main component of gas, which is even stronger than CO2 and causing climate change. Also, recent research shows a number of direct adverse health effects from gas leaked in our homes. DTE is far behind other energy companies in Michigan and elsewhere in moving towards sustainable sources of energy. DTE appears to be paying little attention to the future of our climate or the health of our citizens. If this resolution passes, I urge city officials to explore the following. Is it true that DTE uses large amounts of ratepayer dollars for campaign donations and for lobbying against sustainable energy? Is it true that DTE uses my money to support their greenwashing commercials on TV, which ignore their foot dragging with sustainable energy? And finally, is it true that 4 months ago, DTE requested that the Michigan Public Service Commission approve large rate increases to protect high pay for its executives and high return to its shareholders? High pay and high returns to shareholders seem inappropriate for a company like DTE that fights to preserve generation of dirty energy using 20th century technology. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vincent Caruso.
Vince Caruso. Phone number 879, go ahead. Vincent Caruso, you can press *6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, this is Vince Caruso, 556 Glendale Circle, coordinating member and founding member of the Allen Creek Watershed Group, board and founding member of CARD, Coalition for Action and Remediation, and a former elected executive committee member of Sierra Club Durham Valley Group. I'm calling tonight to state that putting residential housing at 415 West Washington would be a major mistake and very dangerous. New discussions at City Hall regarding development at 415 for residential is ill-advised. Allen's Creek Group does not support this proposal. We communicated this to City Council and Planning Commission several times. First Street Foundation, which is an open source flood modeling group, has been closely working with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, in recent years to update and greatly update the low-vol current floodplain maps of up to 33%, but they really are. And FEMA agrees. FEMA is now working on FEMA 2.0 to update their maps that they say are not accurate. Our current city leaders pretend to plan for global warming, but propose building residential, no less, in dangerous floodplain locations. For some reason, city officials failed to involve Jerry Hancock in the evaluation of 415 plan. Planning officials stated, "Oh, our bad." Jerry made comment anyway. Jerry Hancock, the city stormwater and floodplain programs coordinator, raised concerns about the development proposal, saying putting a large residential structure in the flood zone is inconsistent with the city's flood mitigation policy. Since 2004, the city's policy has been to look for opportunities to purchase floodplain properties and demolish structures. Chemicals on this site are set to be planned to be cleaned or treated, but may float in floodwater if a flood occurs, in addition to the chemicals coming from all the flooded cars on the site gets built. These chemicals will migrate into the neighborhoods and contaminate homes in the Old West Side. The 415 West Washington site was flooded in 1968 in the 100-year flood. Reliable sources, it was more like a 50-year rain. When a meeting of city officials, the Watershed Council, and county officials were meeting in the building to discuss flood hazards, and
30
the
seconds.
soon-to-be drain commissioner was an attendant, his car was flooded in total, and they were trapped in this building. They had no idea they were in a dangerous situation with a flood soon to happen, which tells you how dangerous this site is. Flood experts were trapped in this building. The 68 flood waters are very close to the train trestle at 415 at 10 feet 6 inches. The site is, in all likelihood, has much larger floodplain due to climate change, FEMA low-balling, and their floodplain maps, and much more dangerous than the maps suggest. Voters
Thank you.
the Ann Arbor affordable housing tax proposal without allowing the funds to be used in the floodplain for affordable.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kitty Kahn.
Call caller with the phone number ending in 345. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Kitty Kahn. I live in the 5th Ward. I'm calling in about the proposed development for 415 West Washington. I was planning to speak about building in a floodplain, but the previous speaker covered that, so instead I'll speak about the fact that the site is in the Old West Side Historic District. I'll be quoting from the Historic District Guidelines. This is from the section on new construction in a historic district. Not appropriate. Introducing any new building that is out of scale or otherwise inappropriate to the setting's historic character. Introducing a new feature that is visually incompatible with or that destroys the patterns of the site or the district. Introducing new construction onto a site or in a district which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, and texture, or which destroys relationships on the site or the district, unquote. The proposed development is in no way appropriate to the Old West Side. It is not compatible in terms of size and scale, and it would destroy relationships with the neighborhood. Please do not approve this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Adam Goodman.
Adam Goodman, go ahead.
Hi. I'm talking to you tonight also from the 5th Ward, also about 415 West Washington. I am personally quite excited to see this project advance. I think the public benefits provided by it are really important to the city. And so I'm hoping you will not only approve this rezoning request, but take whatever steps are prudent to ensure that the project actually succeeds, that it actually gets built, and actually provides all the promised benefits. So, talking about the benefits, as proposed, this PUD would involve remediating the environmental contamination on the site, would reactivate a long blighted site and put it to productive uses, adding badly needed market rate and affordable housing on site, and then the proceeds would help fund other affordable housing projects elsewhere in the city. This last bit is particularly important because we are seeing development costs continue to rise for affordable housing projects. As I recall, there was a recent memo about the Catherine and Fourth project discussing that increased costs are already becoming a problem. So our affordable housing millage is not enough. We need to take every opportunity we can get to supplement it, and this project would do that. However, it's clear also this is going to be a difficult project to develop. It requires environmental remediation. There are several additional restrictions in these proposed PUD regulations, including preventing construction in the floodway, requiring that the chimney be preserved, requiring that a segment of the tree line trail be constructed. By the way, on the last point, the proposed ordinance specifically requires collaboration with the Tree Line Conservancy, which is a private nonprofit by name in the ordinance. And I'm not sure if it's actually appropriate to or proper to name a private entity in a zoning ordinance like that. Maybe I could look into that. Anyway, the point here, I saw in Councilmember Briggs' newsletter that she's planning to propose an amendment that would add even more development restrictions to this site around green building requirements. And I could certainly appreciate the intent behind this, but I would ask, has anyone evaluated whether such an amendment would impact the feasibility of this project? We need to make sure that we are not making the perfect the enemy of the good here. We do need this project to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Larry Deck.
Well, I'm Larry Deck. I'm here to talk about everybody's favorite project, the East Medical Center Drive Bridge over the railroad, a CA-17 on your consent agenda. I hope you had a chance to look at the material I sent yesterday that illustrates a little bit what I'll be talking about. As you know, you directed staff to restore the 2.5 feet that were taken away from the bridge in the design to the west sidewalk on the bridge to make it 10.5 feet like it is. Now, it may turn out that doing that requires adding an additional beam underneath the bridge. If that's the case, then it's potentially could be 6 feet added there rather than 2.5 feet, because the existing beams on the bridge that are there both now and in the current plan are just about 6 feet across, 5 feet 11 inches and a little bit more. So it might be possible at minimal cost to widen that sidewalk. The main cost isn't the decking on the top, the main cost is the support structure underneath. So if we can get, using basically the same support structure, get some added width on that sidewalk, that would be beneficial. And then instead of having a 10.5-foot sidewalk there, we could have a 14-foot sidewalk with room for bi-directional bike lanes and a pedestrian lane, and in turn that would connect to the planned trail loop under the bridge, which we hope to have built before too long, and make it better for everybody, safer and more comfortable for bikers and walkers. Councilmember Radina responded to me, and I appreciate the comment, that the issue before you says at least 10.5 feet on that bridge. And it's good that it says that, but it doesn't say to try to go more. What I would ask is that the council direct staff to investigate the possibility of making that addition wider than 2.5 feet, make it up to maybe 6 feet, so that we end up with a very safe and usable wider sidewalk there. So if we can make that direction in some way to staff, that would be beneficial, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Blaine Coleman.
Oh, and there goes Jen Iyer walking out. Ann Arbor City Council. No city council ever fought harder or longer to keep killing Palestinians. Isn't it strange that the city council member that took all that campaign money from old friends of the Israel Defense Forces just had to run out of the room? For 20 years, you have forcefully halted every resolution that objected to U.S. military aid pouring into Israel. 20 years. Your main weapon is to keep the word anti-Semitism on speed dial and wield it as a weapon to protect the apartheid state of Israel. You are exactly like a Klansman shedding crocodile tears over anti-white racism while lynching your way across Black America. There is nothing lower than a corrupted governmental body like you, corrupted by your 20 years of treating the Palestinian people like insects to be banished from your sight. That's how you treat them. In this foul atmosphere of genocidal racism, you sent the police to clear out your chambers here when they were packed with Palestinian protesters and your friends. You ignored thousands who petitioned you, thousands who marched outside this building for an end to aid to Israel. You are even unmoved by Israel's long, intimate military alliance with apartheid South Africa. With apartheid South Africa, for God's sake, even that doesn't move you. No U.S. City Council, none, can match your record, your bloody record of racism against the Palestinian people. The mayor can't even make eye contact. Asshole. 20 inhuman years of refusing to even vote on a simple resolution like this. We are against military aid to Israel. Simple. You fiercely punished your own Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission when it dared to propose such a resolution to you. Meanwhile, loaded with your tax money and guarded by your mayor's gavel, Israel continues shooting and bombing its way across the Middle East. Across the Middle East.
Our next speaker is Mojan Savabi Asafani.
Hello, Ann Arbor. I'm here to still demand that this City Council passes a resolution and speaks up against the slaughter of Palestinian people. I have been coming here for 20 years, and I will continue to come until I see the state of Israel go out of business. And members who are sitting here are very well aware of the genocide that's happening to Palestinian people. I know that because I spent a few minutes talking to here Ms. Erica Briggs, and she told me that she's all aware. Everything I said to her, I said, children are being killed, and she said, I know that. I said, every time you just carelessly go to work without paying any attention to the lives of people you impact, children are dying, children that I care about, children that I know and I want to protect. And to all of that, she responded, I know. Therefore, if she knows, I'm sure the rest of you know, and if you didn't know, you must be receiving all my emails and all my links, so you know there is a genocide happening in Palestine with the money that this country, United States of America, provides for a racist Nazi state like Israel. You must very well be aware of all of this. There is a Human Rights Commission in this town, and I was very excited when I first arrived here to know that such thing exists. What I didn't realize is that it could easily be cleaned up by Zionists in this town and be promoted to something basically less than a Jell-O popsicle. And now we have people right here, Ms. Ghazi, who is on the Human Rights Commission, yet she knows nothing about the history of the Human Rights Commission, and she knows nothing about Palestinian struggle, and she could care less about it. And this woman was been handpicked to sit there because of these two qualities. She has no knowledge, and she couldn't care less about Palestinian people. The one topic in the world today is the Palestinian human rights. People who care about human rights in the world, the first issue is human rights of the Palestinian. Yet this lady here doesn't give a rat's ass about it, and she does not hide it. So I am here to say the reason why you guys have no energy in you left, and I can see that our mayor has gotten much older and much weaker, and his voice is unconvincing even when he's giving awards away. He is falling asleep. It's because your conscience is heavy with burden, and it should be, because you are acting like inhumane beast. It is easy to say we are against giving fucking bullets and bombs to murderers. It's easy to say that, yet you don't say it. It weighs heavy on you. Pass a resolution and make good on your humanity.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tom Stolberg.
Tom Stolberg, phone number ending in 534, go ahead.
Hello, this is Tom Stolberg calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. As a 30-year real estate professional, including experience as a developer with rezonings in multiple communities, I want to speak about the latest in a pattern of problematic zoning actions noticed by experts in planning and zoning over the past several years. The application for 415 West Washington clearly does not meet the intent of multiple laws and policies. Our policies do not intend for development such as this at this location, which is in a historic district and almost entirely in a floodplain. The proposal is for a PUD based on D2 zoning baseline characteristics. D2 permits a maximum height of 60 feet tall, with 70 feet achievable with a premium. However, the UDC states, quote, premium options may be applied only to lots that are located entirely out of a historic district and that contain no part of a floodplain. The D2 premium is clearly not to be used at this location. The proposal instead uses a planned development to achieve this very same thing, 70 feet instead of 60 feet, linked to a similar affordable housing premium. Yet the UDC says that a PUD, quote, shall not be allowed where it is sought primarily to avoid the imposition of standards and requirements of other zoning classifications or other city regulations. There's a more recently added premium that allows 30% additional height in exchange for affordable housing or sustainability. The applicant is basing its justification on this newer premium that replaced planned projects after the Lowertown lawsuit demonstrated that planned project section of the UDC was not in compliance with the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. This newer premium makes no mention of historic districts nor floodplains. Since the intent is very clear in the first premium ordinance language, these two sections are thus in conflict. The UDC speaks to that. Quote, where condition standards or requirements imposed by any provision of this chapter are either more restrictive or less restrictive than comparable standards imposed by any other law, ordinance, or regulation, the provisions that are more restrictive or that impose higher standards or requirements shall govern. So, we are left with the intent of the UDC to not exceed the standard D2 height maximum of 60 feet in a historic district or in a floodplain, which both apply to this location.
30 seconds.
Additionally, the Ann Arbor Historic District guidelines have not been followed. They state that new buildings are to be designed to be compatible with surrounding buildings that contribute to the overall character of the historic district in terms of height, form, size, scale, massing, proportions, and roof shape. This has not been designed to be compatible with the contributing structures in the historic district. Please reject this application and send it back to follow our laws and policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rita Ross.
Rita Ross, phone number ending in 963. Press star 6 to unmute your phone. Caller with the phone number ending in 963, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Rita Ross, and I represent the 174 property owners of Earhart Village Homes as its president. We oppose the Earhart Road 2023 project. Although we were promised meetings with our city council members and the project engineers, they have not occurred. We want to know why you would accept a design that diminishes the level of service as reported in a memo dated February 15, 2019 from Grace Crow and Cynthia Redinger to Nick Hutchinson. Where is the data to justify spending taxpayer money on projects that reduce the level of service? Also, the city's Uniform Development Code stipulates that proposals contributing to a level of service of D, E, or F can be denied by City Council. Why should the same stipulation not only apply to existing roads when implementing road diets? We believe there is room to consider more than one design scenario, as was done for the Gettys Road Improvement Project. The city collaborated with private property owners and made adjustments which resulted in fewer trees destroyed, a shared use path, and bike lanes. Since Earhart Road currently has 4 lanes and the proposal reduces the road to 2 lanes, there is sufficient room for other design scenarios. As proposed, the city will paint chevron lines over excess road service. Let's move the driving lane closer to the median and use the excess road for a bike lane and a walking path or a larger shared path. Constructing a sidewalk outside of the existing road will increase the overall width of the corridor. Keeping intact the existing property line and mature trees creates a narrow road visual, a known factor in reducing auto speeds. Additionally, the Route 3 bus stop at the corner of Earhart and Gettys is located just west of Earhart Road, so most using the stop would have used the existing western sidewalk. All of the schools, churches, and other tributary streets to King Elementary School are on or connect to the western sidewalk. All residents living on the eastern side must cross Earhart Road at some point to reach those destinations. They will use the closest crosswalk to get on the west side of the street. The goal should be reducing overall road speed and on creating adequate and properly designed crosswalks rather than creating a sidewalk to nowhere with gaps that will remain into perpetuity, like in front of Botsford Cemetery and Pineberry Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathy Boris.
Kathy Boris, phone number ending, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm calling from Ward 5 to speak about the rezoning of 415 West Washington, which has been recommended by the Planning Department. 415 West Washington is a difficult site to develop, especially for residential use. That is because most of the site is in the floodplain. One of the highest authorities on building in the floodplain is the National Flood Insurance Program. And they are quoted in our own city website as recommending that, quote, residential uses in the floodplain be discouraged, end quote. That to me is a very clear recommendation. Don't build residential in the floodplain. Locally, we have Jerry Hancock, our stormwater and floodplain programs coordinator. In his memo to the planning department, dated February 6th of this year, he says, quote, for the past 19 years, the policy direction the city has taken for floodplain mitigation through the various hazard mitigation plans has been to look for opportunities to purchase property, demolish structures, and lower the intensity of use in the floodplain. The concept plan to sell 415 Washington, this city-owned parcel, works at cross purposes to the city's floodplain mitigation efforts, end quote. But Mr. Hancock's memo does not mention the toxins in the 415 West Washington site. Lucky for us, Rita LaCaruso, Professor Emerita, U of M, addresses the toxins in her March 17 letter to our mayor and city council. Her letter reminds us of two things. First, that both the benzene and the TCE found at the 415 Washington site are known carcinogens. Second, her letter reminds us that, quote, because of flooding risks, the possibility that floodwater will carry pollutants beyond the site requires careful, knowledgeable analysis, end quote. The kind of analysis that personally I would trust only experts to do. So I urge the mayor and city council to heed the words of three experts, the National Flood Insurance Program, Jerry Hancock, and Rita LaCaruso, and send this plan back to the Planning Commission. It needs more experts to take a look at it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patricia Jackson.
Patricia Jackson, phone number ending in 518. Press star 6 to unmute your phone. Patricia Jackson, phone number ending in 518. Do you have a comment? Patricia Jackson, if you can press star 6 to unmute your phone. Mayor, it looks like she hung up.
Expecting that it's technical difficulty with council's acquiescence, what I think I'd like to do is roll on to the next speaker, and then if she pops on in time, we'll pick her up.
Okay.
That'll give her perhaps up to 3 minutes. Our next speaker is Muffy McKenzie.
Caller with the phone number ending in 012. Press star 6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
You are unmuted.
Good evening. My name is Muffy McKenzie, and I live at 217 3rd Street. As a nearby resident to 415 West Washington, I have many concerns about the city's plans to move forward to build on this site. Several of them have been mentioned, the historic district, the concerns about the floodplain, but my number one concerns are the toxins and the plume on this site and spreading. These toxins are a hazard to everyone. These toxins should be cleaned up now, urgently. This is a city-owned property. The city and the county are responsible for the cleanup. This responsibility should not depend on or wait on an unknown developer who may or may not purchase the site. Who knows how long that process could take? This is very urgent for the health and well-being of our entire community. We have been asking for several months, what is the estimated cost for the cleanup? Does the cost differ for use, if it's a park, or residential, or commercial uses? I was just recently told by my city council people that the cost is between $1 and $3 million. But for what use? Where is the data on this? How can the city make an informed decision with public support without the actual costs revealed? Whatever the cost, the city and the county need to find the money to clean this site up now. We have a lot of bright minds in the city who could find ways other than waiting on a might-be developer. Don't wait. Please, don't shift the city's responsibility to clean the site up. Please, clean this up now. The health and well-being of our community depends on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patricia Jackson.
Mayor, I don't see Ms. Jackson back on the Zoom call.
Giving her a moment. All right. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council, for passing the proclamation declaring March as Social Work Month. And thank you so much to Dwayne Brejak and Social Work Dean Beth Angel for also coming today. You know, what I think is so special about our profession, which is why my colleague and fellow social worker Lynn Song and I brought this forward, is we really strive to look at things with an equity lens, and we're about systems change. And thank you for moving that forward. You know, a strength-based perspective is so important when you're dealing with community issues or community problems. So thank you.
Further communication from council? Councilmember Song.
I can't remember if I did this last month, but or 2 weeks ago, but I wanted to thank city staff again for all the work in the storm responses, multiple storm responses that we had, staffing warming centers, calling for food donations, coordinating with social service agencies. And I think it really demonstrated how we as a city can work collaboratively with the library that set up an overnight shelter in the county. But again, it also shed some light as to who is most impacted during these emergencies. Currently, we have 95 families in shelters, mostly families with children. So we have 159 children, 102 adults who are being temporarily housed until April 1st when county funding ends. I really appreciate how the county is quickly trying to address this situation, but I encourage folks to contact our county colleagues and also contact the folks who are working on the ground, doing assessments. So Mission, Alpha House, Avalon, Washington Housing Alliance are trying to figure out how we could find a way to continue rapid rehousing as we did during the pandemic and hopefully find additional resources. We can always ask for more federal money, more state money. But let me also speak to residents and social workers who are working daily to assist families who've escaped Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. So these are the neighbors who help neighbors, not through resolutions outside of our authority. I'm reminded as my time as Secretary General of University of Michigan's Model United Nations. So even as a 19-year-old, I understood that I was not a congressional representative or a State Department policymaker. And that lesson continues now in City Council. Our authority is here with our budget, in our care for neighbors and constituents. So if folks want to pursue resolutions, there are Model UNs in the high schools. And again, the University of Michigan Model UN. Thank you.
Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that Councilmember Harrison and I will be having a joint coffee hour on Monday, March 27th from 4:30 to 5:30, and that will not be held at the Traverwood Library as we had initially hoped, but we are very happy to say that it will be held in the downtown library in the multi-purpose room, and we hope to see anyone there who has questions for us. Thank you.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a minute to mention something that's actually schools related. But we talk a lot about equity here, and there's a really important initiative right now, a fundraiser going on within the school district. The PTO Council, which is a group with representatives from every PTO throughout the Ann Arbor Public Schools, is doing a fundraiser. This is the first of its kind. It's to raise money for Title I schools within the district for their PTO, to help fund and equalize their PTO budgets. This is a really important thing to me. I just donated today, and I encourage everybody to donate if you can. When I first became engaged with the schools, my daughter was a kindergartner at Dickin Elementary, and it was a Title I school at the time. It has been on and off throughout the years, and I was shocked to learn that that my daughter's school really struggled to fundraise to fund basic teacher supplies, classroom supplies, and the very basic field trips for our kids, while there were other schools in the district that could afford, through their PTO donations, to send every fifth grader to space camp every year. There are huge inequities within our district. And, back then I remember raising it at a PTOC meeting, and it just wasn't something that people were interested in at the time. But I'm really happy to see that folks have continued to work at it over the years, and we're now seeing some interest in somehow creating a little more equity between our schools. This is an issue that has only become exacerbated by the district's schools of choice within the district. The ability for folks to transfer to any school they want, and sometimes that ends up robbing schools of resources. And so I really, again, I applaud the PTOC for taking this on. I hope it becomes an annual thing. I hope it will grow over the years. And I encourage anyone, they're just asking for $20. So if you can afford it, if you can afford to donate a little more, great. But if you go to a2schools.org/PTOC, you'll see the GoFundMe link there.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, I wanted to mention that Councilmember Ghazi Edwin and I have our next coffee hour coming up together at York on April 16th at 11 a.m. So once again, we'll be crossing over into the 4th Ward, but all are welcome.
Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to take a few minutes to thank the Urbanism Club at University of Michigan. This is, I think, a pretty newly formed club of undergraduate students who are highly engaged in local issues like safe multimodal transit, housing, sustainability, and livable multi-use neighborhoods. They invited me to one of their meetings last week. It was lovely. I was really struck with their passion and engagement on local issues. These are undergrads reading our agenda and following City Council. I think that's pretty impressive. But I was also struck by several of them saying that they feel that residents would prefer that they weren't here. And they asked questions like, shouldn't the city want to retain us? And I thought, yes, we should want to retain you. And I not only welcome them, but I'm really heartened by their care of our community and, like I said, their engagement in local issues. And I hope that we are building a community that they can stay in if they so choose. Thank you.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Watson.
I wanted to remind residents that the park's natural area preservation volunteer stewardship days are starting back up. You can sign up to volunteer for park cleanups at vhub.at/NAP, but you can also find it through the parks website, and a sign up and calendar is contained there through Volunteer Hub. The next Stewardship Day will be actually in Ward 2 at Furstenberg Nature Area off of Fuller Road. It'll be this Saturday at 9 a.m. And another opportunity in Ward 2 will also be at Folkestone Park on April Fool's Day, April 1st, meeting at 9 a.m. as well. I'd also like to thank all the neighbors who came to my March 5th coffee hour. I'll be hosting another one March 25th, Sunday, March 25th at 3 p.m. at the Plymouth Road Sweetwater. So I hope to see residents there.
Further communication from council. I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointment that was presented to City Council at the March 6, 2023 regular session to the Commission on Disability Issues. Rosanita Ratcliffe. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Ghazi Edmond, seconded by Councilmember Radina. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. I would like to recommend the following nomination for your consideration to the Board of Review. Ann Harlow. We have before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Ackman.
I'd like to pull CA, sorry, I think it's 18. Yeah, CA 18 for discussion, please.
Further discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, I'd like to pull CA 19. Yep, and CA 20. And then I just wanted to just briefly say for CA 7, how excited I am to see our ARPA funds being used to purchase these 8 duplexes to expand our affordable housing supply in the city and in the 5th Ward.
Councilmember Iyer. Very good. Further discussion of the consent agenda. For my part, I'd like to follow up on Councilmember Briggs. You've got 2 minutes.
I think there's something else. There is. It is. I'm sorry. Maybe you should continue on and come back to me because I can't find the number. It is the one on the economic development.
That's 19.
Oh, never mind.
No worries. I'd just like to follow up very briefly on what Councilmember Briggs identified. That is to shine some light on the Housing Commission's purchase of 8 units of affordable housing, which we are able to do thanks to the American Rescue Plan. As folks know, through the Biden-Harris American Rescue Plan, jurisdictions throughout the United States received funds that they were able to use for a variety of approved purposes. Here in Ann Arbor, we established a set of uses over the course of wide public engagement and several council meetings, one of which was with respect to the expansion of affordable housing. And here is, you see it in effect. We are going to utilize $3.5 million of American Rescue Plan funding to acquire these properties in conjunction with or through the good offices of the Housing Commission, thereby providing permanent affordable housing for even more residents going on in perpetuity. These will be pegged at 60% AMI, and I am incredibly excited about the work that we're doing that we are able to do here as a result of partnership and vision at the federal level. Further discussion on the consent agenda. Councilmember Song, my apologies from back there.
I don't want to pull this, but I just want to comment on CA2. So the Glacier Highlands Neighborhood Association has had this Memorial Day parade since the 1960s. It draws a couple hundred folks in the neighborhood out. It's a good opportunity to meet your neighbors. It's open for folks to come from throughout the city. What we do is we read the names of veterans who've passed in the past year. My own father attends. He's a veteran. He was a medevac pilot for the South Vietnamese Air Force during the Vietnam War. So The mayor also presents and retires a flag. We have a high school student who plays taps. There's a bike parade. So I encourage folks to look at the website for the Neighborhood Association for details on lineup, and I hope to see you all there.
Further discussion of the consent agenda? All in favor of the consent agenda with the exception of CA 18, 19, and 20, please say aye. Opposed? It is approved. The consent agenda is approved with the exception of CA 18, 19, and 20 with 11 council members present. All vote in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA 4, CA 7, CA 8. And that is all. CA 18, resolution to approve amendment number 1 of the right-of-way license agreement with Spin Inc. for the operation of electric scooters and electric bicycles in the city of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Ackman, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion, please, of CA 18. Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. Mainly, I wanted to pull this to highlight some of what this amended agreement with Spin will bring to Ann Arbor's mobility landscape. The Transportation Commission discussed this issue at length in our meeting last week and supported this. So Spin Inc. has been operating e-scooters in Ann Arbor since 2019. They started with 200 and now operate 400. And some of you might remember a bike share program that we had several years ago that I think were mainly docked at the downtown branch of the library. It wasn't very successful, so it went away, and so there's long been talk of relaunching a bike share. So we've been without bike share since 2017. This extension to this agreement with the scooters would be 100 dockless bikes, e-bikes to start. We would see how well it works. We want to make sure that there's not nuisances that come about and just learn our way around this and it doesn't lead to obstructions. We'll monitor and then hopefully we'll be able to expand it. I wanted to highlight some of the cool things about what they're doing. So one thing that they're doing this started February 1st with the scooters and will extend to the bikes is equity considerations. So they have an access program which allows for people in affordable housing or of moderate means to get a reduced fee. And they've already established some relationships with our affordable housing complexes. They also have a special card that you can get so that you can use their vehicles without having a credit card, bank, or smartphone. So really what we're trying to do is broaden opportunity to these devices. One thing that the data nerd in me is excited about is that they have to share their data with us. These are aggregate data, not personally identifying, but it can show us where use is strongest and where paths are being taken, and I think that's going to help us a lot with our mobility planning. So I'm really excited to support this tonight as a way of further advancing our mobility goals and furthering our transportation plan. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. CA 19, resolution to approve amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement between Ann Arbor Spark and the City of Ann Arbor for economic development services. $24,500 amendment, $99,500 contract total. Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of CA 19, Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, thanks. I was excited to see this on the agenda. This is, for folks that aren't looking at our agenda right now, a benchmarking study for economic development. It is with Ann Arbor Spark. It will develop a benchmarking study to identify quantitative and qualitative factors that drive the economic development process at 10 locations across the United States. And so Councilmember Watson and I had been talking about some elements that we had wanted to get some more information on, and thought this would be a good opportunity to include a question. We've communicated with staff, and it sounds like I don't need to create a formal amendment to this because there wants to be a little bit of flexibility in terms of the questions, but I did want to kind of put it on the record that we have an interest in getting an answer to the question. Specifically, are there any municipal programs or services to support the growth and or remedy the displacement of minority-owned small businesses? So we just want to get information on that so to inform our future city practices as well, and excited to see this work being done.
Further discussion of CA 18. Councilmember Cornell.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So full and fair disclosure, I used to be employed by Ann Arbor Spark. And when I saw this on the agenda, I had questions regarding just general best practices in terms of benchmarking as an economic development activity that increases our competitiveness. This, to me, felt like something that the organization should be doing and doing well for their own efforts and for their efforts on behalf of the city contract that is awarded to them annually or has been historically. I spoke with our city administrator, Mr. Dehone. It was really helpful in that regard, and I'm excited about this, and I'm excited to support it tonight. I think that the difference for me is, or sort of what led me to want to support this, is the notion that we would collect data that the city is not able to collect on its own in order to inform our future economic development efforts. Right now, our economic development efforts are centered around what our local development finance authority and the state direct us to do in terms of competitiveness, which is deemed driving industries. It's a very narrow focus. High-tech industries, biotech, IT, you can look it up on the state's website, but there are 5 focuses: advanced automotive. This would, in my mind, and to Councilmember Briggs' point, really expand that view and really be informative around where are the gaps, where can we better support business attraction, retention, acceleration, talent attraction, enhancement. I'd like to see what those gaps are and to really understand it so that as going forward, the city can develop an economic development strategy that meets not only the needs of those driving industry businesses, but the businesses on Main Street, other new emerging industries that might afford us economic advantage and economic opportunity in the city. So I'm enthusiastic to do that. I think that some of the thought around filling those gaps should be part of the process of developing which cities to go to and benchmark against and which questions we ask. And I'm hopeful for that data to really be a powerful source of truth for us as we come up with an economic development strategy for the citywide.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. Much has been said already, so I'll just add thanks to Mr. Dehone for putting this together, for bringing a vision of economic development to our city that we have not enjoyed before. And I know it comes from his vast experience in other areas, and I think it was maybe kind of a shock to come to Ann Arbor and learn that we just kind of let things happen here in terms, or we have for a long time. And we've been fortunate that many people want to make things happen here. And so the city has continued to grow and develop without having a strategy directed by any one entity or the city. However, we can do better. And this is just one piece of it. There are other pieces in motion. The Economic Development Corporation, of course, which I've talked about before, has broadened its mission to take a more active role in economic development activities in the city. And this is going to inform a lot of the work that may be done there, as well as future work that may be done, really on the city side as well. So again, I support this. I think it's a move in the right direction, and I think it's a signal to residents that we are really taking a greater measure of control over our destiny here and trying to be more thoughtful and intentional about where and when we grow and how we can increase economic activity everywhere from small business to large in our city.
Further discussion? Councilor Song.
I'm really encouraged by this work. I also want to point to how the county had allocated $1 million towards supporting economic development through a small business growth activator, and there are applications that can be submitted for $5,000 grants, and that's actually in collaboration with Spark, the Association of Businesses of Color, and that's just to help small businesses with, I think it's less than 10 employees. But the county has a website up. The grant process has been open since January, and the goal is that the $1 million would go towards 80 to 100 small business owners who were left out of the PPP or state federal programs during COVID. So I'd love to see how Spark can help motivate this work so that we can see bigger impact in more vulnerable communities.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C820, resolution directing the city administrator to negotiate a new natural gas franchise. Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of C820. I understand we have an introduction from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Dr. Stoltz available. She will handle the staff introduction for this item.
Dr. Stoltz.
Good evening, members of council. Thank you for having me here tonight. There were 4 questions that were posed to us, and I'd like to address those in the order in which I received them. The first is the purpose or the goals of the negotiation. To answer this question, I'd like to first start by stating what a franchise is. Under Michigan law, a franchise is a contract between a local unit of government and a utility that does 2 things. 1, governs the use of the public rights-of-way, and 2nd, sets the conditions under which the company may, for a set period, provide the specified utility service. Franchises can also include additional terms, and several local governments across the country have successfully advanced affordability, equity, and clean energy goals via franchise negotiations, while also optimizing the use of public rights-of-way. In Michigan, you need to have a franchise to provide a service in a community. Given the importance of the franchise and the reality that our existing franchise for natural gas provision expires in 2027, staff believe we should start negotiating a new franchise agreement as soon as possible and work to begin immediately ensuring that this new franchise aligns with our A20 goals, including ensuring that residents have choices that allow them to heat their homes and businesses with safe, healthy, clean, affordable, and stably priced fuel. Second question. How this activity has the potential to advance our A20 goals. Staff believe that no resident should be forced to pay for energy that negatively impacts their health and safety, and that is hazardous to our community. That's why we see upcoming franchise discussions as an opportunity to provide residents with energy choices that are, as mentioned previously, safe, healthy, affordable, and clean. And this is where the franchise most directly intersects with A20. By exploring options that will allow us to heat our homes and businesses with clean, renewable, and affordable energy. This directly aligns with our A20 goals, specifically strategies 2 and 3. Third question, why this wasn't discussed earlier is an option. As mentioned previously, our existing franchise doesn't expire until 2027. As part of our work to help the community transition towards more sustainable sources of heating and cooling, staff have been reviewing a slew of documents, including the city's existing franchise. Upon review, we noted the expiration date, as well as the fact that the franchise is terminable at will. Now, it's important at this point to note that historically, franchises have almost always exclusively focused on the terms governing the use of the public rights-of-way, or that first purpose I mentioned previously. But given community discussions around achievement of A20, staff began reviewing opportunities to advance the second purpose of a franchise, which is setting the conditions under which a company may, for a set period of time, provide a specified utility service. This led staff to begin researching how other communities have advanced their climate and equity goals when selecting their utility providers. After several conversations with peer cities, a decision was made by staff to bring tonight's resolution forward to ensure we are notifying decision makers, the public, and potential providers as soon as possible about the city's opportunity to negotiate this new heating franchise and ensure it's consistent with best practices, certainly regarding the use of rights-of-way, as well as full alignment with A20 and the city's affordability goals. And finally, fourth question, how community members' commissions will be included as we proceed forward. If council approves the resolution before you tonight, we will shortly announce a series of public meetings to share more details about what the franchise is, as well as what it is not, and gather ideas from the public about what they would like to see included in a new heating franchise. We also anticipate having a special discussion with the city's Energy Commission on the topic and opening a new email address where folks can send ideas and suggestions at any point. That email will be franchisefeedback@a2gov.org. Additionally, if the resolution passes, staff will prepare a formal request for ideas where Ann Arborites and potential utility providers or energy providers can send their ideas about how the city could achieve a careful transition to renewable energy choices for heating all of our Ann Arbor homes and businesses. Finally, staff have already launched a new city website to keep the public apprised of work on the heating franchise, and we will continue to keep that up to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Stoltz. That is perfect. I've just been hearing some questions from community members in terms of kind of what this meant, and I think you answered all of those quite fully. I hope that alleviates some of the questions and kind of confusion that folks have had, both on our commissions and just kind of residents kind of wondering what this means for them. So it's exciting. I'm excited to support it tonight, and thanks.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stoltz. I just want to reiterate that, we're doing this because Ann Arbor residents are demanding energy that is safe, affordable, reliable, and sustainable. And this aligns with our A20 goals. It's a great time to be having this discussion, getting in early, well in advance of 2027, and to begin having a community-wide discussion about how we can very carefully and responsibly transition to a clean energy future throughout our city. Studies have shown the negative health effects of burning fossil fuels in our homes. No person should have to sacrifice their health and their safety and their well-being in order to heat their home or their business. So we are committed to this work of transitioning to a clean energy future, while also improving, and this is a very important point, improving the reliability and the resilience and the safety and affordability of the city's energy. Finally, what we do here in Ann Arbor, this is really exciting to me, because what we do here in Ann Arbor can really serve as a model nationwide. We are taking a really unique look at how we approach this franchise. And we can be serving as a model, just as our A20 plan already serves as a model for the country and for communities across the country. So I'm excited to support this tonight.
Councilmember Dish.
I don't want to repeat my colleagues' excellent, eloquent, and enthusiastic words. I did want to note that some people may be aware that Planning Commission had been debating achieving a change like this through an amendment to the UDC, to the city's development land use governance code. And I am so pleased to see this option surface, which, because there's no precedent for what we were thinking of doing in the UDC, no precedent in Michigan. And this option that we're looking at comes up as part of how we routinely need to do business with DTE anyway. We would be renegotiating this franchise for 2027, and we are starting early to see whether they can provide us the kind of clean, reliable, stably priced energy that we deserve.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
I'm also really excited to support this, and thank you, Dr. Stoltz. As someone who's really interested in just holding DT more accountable and transparency, from questions I've had from community members, it's about how exactly will this allow us to have more choices, and I'm wondering if you could expand upon that a little bit more.
Sure. So let me first start by saying the franchise and the process I outlined is about identifying what pathways are open to us to hit our A20 goals. Right now, the reality is most people have one choice, and that's heating their home with natural gas. Sometimes more affluent households have choice of making the transition over to electric, but there are other choices that are available. Certainly within A20, we are looking to prioritize and help people make the transition should they want to heat pumps in greater efficiency. But there are other things like, for example, geothermal, or different heating technologies that might actually prove more viable. So the idea here with the franchise is not just to talk to DT, but to talk to the entire marketplace and say, these are our goals. This is what council has adopted and what our community is asking for. Help us figure out how to get there. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Councilmember.
It did. So it would give us the ability to also potentially have conversations with other utility providers if we so choose. Okay.
That is correct. And we do anticipate releasing a request for ideas in which we're not just asking Ann Arbor residents, we certainly are asking Ann Arbor residents, but we also want to ask the marketplace, what ideas do you have for how we can hit these goals?
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackman.
I wanted to thank Dr. Stoltz and staff just for, approaching this problem with so much, thoughtfulness and innovation. I'm excited to just live in a community where we're having these discussions and we have this opportunity. In particular, I'm excited about the idea of, having a series of community conversations around this. And I appreciate, I don't know if you noticed that you did this, but you called it a heating franchise instead of a gas franchise. And I appreciate that because I think it highlights the fact that we have many different options for heating our homes. And indeed, the technology is already here to heat our homes much more efficiently and much more safely. And like I said, I think these community conversations are going to allow us an opportunity to talk about those options. Thank you.
Further discussion? For my part, I too am incredibly excited about this project and want to thank staff, both, of course, OSI, but also the legal department too, for the exciting, innovative, and long-range work that's been done to get us to this point, to get us to realize and hopefully realize this option. We all know that the status quo is not acceptable. Ann Arbor residents, we deserve reliable, affordable, clean, healthy energy to heat and power our homes. By beginning these discussions, we are looking to facilitate more energy choices for residents. We are listening to the vast majority of Ann Arbor residents, Ann Arbor voters, who supported our A20 plan in November. By their vote, what Ann Arborites did is demand that we transition away from fossil fuels, that we reduce in-home pollution that leads to asthma, cancer, and lung disease, and that we take aggressive steps to achieve our goal of community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. The Council's resolution will empower the administrator to begin initiating a responsible, careful transition to sustainable heating in Ann Arbor, and I am incredibly excited about this multi-step process and believe that it has great promise, and I can't wait for us to take that next step. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. We now come to a public hearing. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about the specific subject matter at the public hearing. Speakers at public hearings do not need to sign up in advance, but their speech must relate to the subject matter of the public hearing, that is to say, the specific item on the agenda. Speakers in all cases will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time is expired. When your time is expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend sections 2.1, 2.2, 2.5, and 2.9 of Chapter 26, Solid Waste of Title II of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Is there anyone online who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't see anyone on the call for this hearing.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. A1, we have before us the regular session meeting minutes of March 6, 2023, moved by Councilmember Watson, seconded by Councilmember Medina. Discussion, please, of A1. All in favor? Opposed? The minutes are approved. B2, an ordinance to amend sections 2.1, 2.2, 2.5, and 2.9 of Chapter 26, Solid Waste of Title II, Solid Waste of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Medina, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Discussion, please, of B1. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. it's been observed that our public hearing, it's been observed that our printed agenda does not include reference to public hearing number 2. Public hearing number 2 is online and listed in registrar. I guess and it is also necessary that we have a public hearing on that prior to the vote and passage of the ordinance. Do I infer, well, I guess let me direct to the city attorney. Do you believe it is necessary for us to postpone this, or can we call the public hearing in reliance upon the online agenda?
When was it issued in the online agenda is something we should know.
City Attorney, I believe it's just missing from the agenda that was printed on paper tonight.
And it's been online.
It was published in the newspaper, and it's been in the packet and online. I think it's just an error on this printed agenda.
Mayor Taylor, I think you should ask if somebody is here to speak at public hearing number 2.
So let us may I have a motion, please, to open the agenda. Moved by Councilmember Watson, second by Councilor Dis. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Well, actually, should we be doing this? Let's take it as
It is already on the agenda.
it's already on the agenda, so we will take it as a scrivener's error, and I will express regret for having skipped public hearing number 2, much to my chagrin, and move forward with calling public hearing number 2. Public hearing number 2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 11, Risk Fund, and repeal Section 1193 of Chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions of Title I of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public hearing number 2 with respect to this matter?
Mayor, I do have a caller online. Caller with the phone number ending in 556, did you have a comment?
Hi, this is Ralph McKee calling from the 5th Ward. I did want to comment on this, and so I appreciate the mayor's getting that straightened out and allowing this comment. This may seem like a small point to many of you, but I think that these types of claims and the way they're processed does provide an important window that council can look in on staff and see how the staff is interacting with the public. And for that reason, I don't think you should change the current process. Ms. Briggs proposed change to ask for a reporting on it is a partial solution, but it doesn't really solve the problem of really eliminating your watching staff interact with residents. And I sent you a detailed email a couple of weeks ago when this came up the first reading, and I won't go into the detail of that, but the gist of it was that I had what I thought was a totally merited small sewer claim. It was initially denied. The person I talked to about that denial letter said, well, the city staff said they didn't cause your sewer backup, so therefore we denied the appeal. I went to an appeal hearing. I'm a retired lawyer. I went there. I had an expert witness from Dynamic Drain who cleared the backup in the drain. They said it was inconceivable that there was no other possibility other than the repair of the water main break in front of my house as to what caused that. The city attorney, a young lawyer whose name escapes me now, was pretty assertive and pretty aggressive, I would say, in saying, look, you can't prove that. I reminded him of the first-year torts case, Paulsgraf, which for you non-lawyers says, if there's a giant explosion, you can assume it came from a particular train engine if it blew up the train. And that principle means you don't have to prove the details of something like that. And the appeal was denied again. And this was a little disconcerting. I don't think anybody without a law degree would have maybe even gotten that far. And I had to essentially threaten to go to court to small claims over it in order to get anything. I got another denial letter, And then it was with a settlement offered of $950 on an $1,100 claim. I took that. I had to dice with Abby Elias for several months about the settlement agreement because it was a clearly inappropriate settlement agreement. I finally got paid almost a year later. I don't think that that was an appropriate way to deal with a pretty simple claim of a taxpayer. And I'm not saying current staff would have done that or the lawyer's office would have done that, but you're never going to know how these claims are being handled unless you actually watch them. That's all I have. I don't want it to sound like sour grapes. That's really not the point. The point is that it's a window into how staff interacts with the public, and that's very important, and I don't think you should eliminate that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing?
Mayor, I don't have any other callers on the line with their hands raised.
Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number B2, an ordinance to amend Chapter 11, Risk Fund, and repeal Section 1193 of Chapter 8, Reorganization of Boards and Commissions, and Title I of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Ackman. Discussion, please, of B2. Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. This was said last time, but I feel like it's worth saying again on the second reading, that our practices to date around this are not normal compared to other municipalities that our attorney's office looked at. They looked at other municipalities in Michigan and across the country. They could find none that had elected council members on their risk fund administration. So I think that is, it's worth aligning our city with those common practices. I appreciate the comments about having insight into staff interactions with our community, but staff interacts with our community all of the time, and I trust them to do that. I do appreciate that it's insightful to see what kinds of claims are being made against the city, which is why we have a resolution later on in the agenda about that. But just wanted to say that I support that for these reasons. Thanks.
Further discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, thanks. Since we just heard from a Fifth Ward caller, I guess I would also just mention that, in addition to what Councilmember Ackman said, that while it's a window into the process, it's also a window to influence the process. And that also, I think, is inappropriate for us as politicians to be potentially influencing a process that should be neutral and unbiased. And I know that myself to be something of a bleeding heart. So if I were ever appointed to this commission, I'd be lobbying for everything. It would not be, it'd be very much in the benefit of residents, but maybe not so much in the role of what's best for the city and taxpayer dollars. So thank you for folks for being interested in this, but I'm supportive of the changes.
Councilmember Ryer.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of take a step back and explain kind of where this came from. This was not something that came from council. Obviously, it is a staff recommendation, and we do have a newish still city attorney who is coming up on a year, and who has been really systematically been looking at how we do business in terms of legal issues within the city, as well she should. And bringing some fresh eyes to things. And I think that this is probably an outgrowth of that, those efforts. It's important, again, to reiterate that no other municipal body that we can find does it this way, and there's a good reason for that. So it's right and proper that we make this change and put this responsibility in the hands of our city administrator and his designees, as it should be, and while also maintaining total transparency in terms of the payments that are made and the claims that are settled. And we'll have again, we'll have a resolution that speaks to that later. So I have no problem supporting this. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55 zoning, rezoning of 2.5 acres from public land to PUD Planned Unit Development District, 415 West Washington, PUD zoning and supplemental regulations, 415 West Washington. Moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion, please, of C1. I believe we have an introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Leonard is available and will handle the introduction for this item.
Mr. Leonard is joining us on Zoom.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think Mr. Delacour actually will be addressing your...
I'm not going to do it.
Mr. Delacourt is also on Zoom.
I told Brett I would do the reading tonight, so I'm glad to be here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Derek Delacourt, I'm the Community Services Administrator for the city. We did receive about 8 questions related to the site tonight. We're going to do our best to answer them up front here, and then obviously both Mr. Leonard and I will be here to answer any questions regarding the project as we go forward. Quickly, I'm going to state out front that the project, the proposed PUD, is in response to City Council Resolution R 2262 that directed staff to present recommendations for redevelopment of the site, along with many others in the city, primarily for consideration in residential use. We've been at this for a considerable amount of time and are grateful to be here tonight to discuss it. The first question we have is a request for an amendment language to include sustainability requirements into supplemental regulations for 415 West Washington. Stated that the goal is that any future building maximizes energy efficiency and is aligned with the goals of 820. The question states, as I think all of us prefer that a building be net zero, but is willing to consider net zero ready if that is more viable at this time. Staff and OSI, planning staff and OSI discussed this today and offered some language both in an email that was sent out to the asker and those who were CC'd on it, and read in summary in the following. If it is desired to add proposed language, the following language is proposed by planning and OSI and can be added to the supplemental regulations. The referenced sustainability component of the UDC is defined as follows. When and where a solar collector surface covers at least 60% of the building's footprint area on a site and the electrical panels of the buildings have capacity to solely power the site by electricity, including any conduit and other necessary infrastructure for future conversions if complete electrification is not achievable at the time of initial construction. So the amendment would be the addition of the following language to the supplemental regulations, section 4, PUD regulations, G, any development of the priority or the property shall comply with the sustainability component of the Unified Development Code. That is very briefly would apply that section of code to any project that came forward to the city in the future. Question 2. Has the city considered the option to clean up the site to recreation standards with the aim to absorb and conduct stormwater? As I understand, we have with other floodplain properties the city has purchased. If so, what would be the cost and how could that be funded? Answer: recreational standards are determined on a site-by-site basis in consultation with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. As staff has been working from the direction of the City Council to explore housing for this location, the site has not been evaluated for stormwater infrastructure as its primary use. It is estimated that the cost of the environmental remediation for recreation would be similar to or higher than the estimated cost for residential cleanup. That is primarily due to concerns are increased when you have a recreational use about direct contact with soil and other use on the property. So as the city is likely a responsible party when it comes for paying for the remediation, it would be responsible for cleanup of contamination at the site, but without the benefit of any private investment to provide financial support through tax increment financing. Thus, the only real vehicle we know of right now that could cover those costs would be the general fund. Question 3, have we considered the benefits, perhaps in terms of savings on flood insurance, reducing flooding to surrounding properties, savings of emergency city response, of making the site a floodway park? Response flood insurance rates are established citywide, while the decisions that the city collectively makes on property regulations and other measures can impact the city's flood insurance rates positively or negatively. This is reviewed at a community-wide scale and does not fluctuate based on individual site decisions. Question 4, floodplain maps. Can we trust these? Some have suggested that FEMA maps are inaccurate and outdated, and the floodplain is likely larger, parentheses plus climate change. FEMA maps are the maps of record to base numerous policy decisions on, parentheses, such as the floodplain overlay district adopted in 2021, which includes 415 West Washington. Actual on-site elevations are further used to delineate floodplain impacts on any site. And has been stated, I think, on several occasions with this site, everything that is proposed and everything that will come forward to council will meet that recently adopted floodplain ordinance for the city in regards to these regulations. Question 5, does our remediation plan explicitly take into account that the site is a floodplain? Do permeable barriers work when there is flooding? Answer, yes. These barriers work in an area with flooding, as it is often corresponds to a water table that is conducive to moving contaminants through the barriers to provide treatment. Question 6, is the height of 70 feet in conflict with what is allowable in D2? Answer, no. The height limit for this site in the D2 would be 70 or 78 feet, depending on the provisions of the Unified Development Code. Question 7, is it accurate that the HDC has said they would reject a development that maximized the elements in the supplemental regulations? If so, are we presenting developers with a concept plan that may not be successful when it goes in front of the HDC in the future? Response, at the recent working session, the Historic District Commission expressed concern should the project maximize the building envelope. However, it is also difficult for the Commission to apply the Secretary of Interior standards, which govern their review, to conceptual massing diagrams presented to date. The proposed PUD provides a limit which any proposal will need to work within to meet the approval of the Commission. As demonstrated by ongoing dialogue with the Historic District Commission, they remain an important partner as the city moves forward with the design of the site with any development partner. And as you'll hear us, Brett and I talk about repeatedly tonight, at this point, it is important that we believe it's important to bring that development partner into the process so we can further provide the details the HDC needs to make such decisions. Ultimately, they have that authority to make an up or down decision on the outside elements of the site. Would the cost be lower, higher for remediation if we weren't going to place housing on the site and we're seeking to convert the site to green space? In our conversations with our environmental folks, likely higher, as less physical development occurs on the site, the design, monitoring, and effectiveness of the permeable reactive barriers would become more critical, as any design elements would need to address potential exposures to contamination. For example, a stormwater pond or other recreational uses on site would provide a greater opportunity for potential contamination exposure than equivalent conditions under building or parking area. I.e., if the site is recreational or not capped, the possibilities of direct connection to the contamination increase, therefore the cost of remediation goes up. Again, as we've gone through this process, staff has been directed at this point to consider housing for the site. Recreation and open space, it was not the direction of the council at this point, but we did have some time today to talk to our environmental experts, and that was how they advised us today on the site. That's all for the pre-printed questions, and obviously we're here to answer anything else you may have as the discussion goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. We are asked to rezone and approve for residential development a 2.5-acre site located in the Old West Side Historic District and the Allen Creek floodplain. The rezoning petition is accompanied by a concept plan for an elevated residential structure of about 134,000 square feet, 5 stories at its highest point, with parking provided underneath and parking capped at 1 space per unit. There will be a minimum of 60% of the site required to be preserved as open space, and either the greater of 15% or 15 units of affordable housing is also required, can be done on-site or by payment in lieu, as is construction of a segment of the tree-lined trail. Mixed use will be allowed. In 2019, Council asked staff to explore developing housing on this site, together with several other underutilized city-owned properties. We learned early on that because it is contaminated and lies in close proximity to the railroad, 415 West Washington would be ineligible for federal affordable housing funding. The current site is vacant. It contains an existing building that is functionally obsolete, blighted, and sits 4 to 10 feet below the floodplain. The Historic District Commission approved its demolition in September 2018, judging that adaptive reuse would not be possible. The site is currently 100% impervious surface with no stormwater controls whatsoever. It contains remnants of road salt from when it housed the Washington County Road Commission, plus 2 highly flammable carcinogenic chemicals. As the owner of the site, the city is likely the primary responsible party for the contamination. Staff advises us, as you've heard, that our best strategy for meeting that responsibility, cleaning up the site, and serving affordable housing goals is to sell the site to a private developer and make a brownfield plan. A viable brownfield plan will necessitate residential development, and we have specified with this PUD that it will require affordable housing, payment in lieu, or units. We have heard concerns about pursuing residential development in a floodplain. Let me underscore that this PUD zoning will ensure considerably better floodwater management than what currently exists. It replaces a structure that sits below the floodplain, provides stormwater management where there is none, significantly reduces impervious surface, and conforms fully with the city's revised and strengthened floodplain ordinance, which Council approved in January 2021. That ordinance requires residential construction in the flood fringe, not the floodway, because you can't do it there, to be elevated 1 foot over a flood level that has a 0.2 or 1 in 500 annual chance of occurring. The city's floodplain staff wrote that ordinance to guide safe residential development in the flood fringe. The city's floodplain staff also wrote a hazard mitigation plan whose aspirational goals are higher than the standards of the ordinance.
Councilmember?
Yes, I can come back to this. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councilmember Briggs.
So, thank you. As usual, Councilmember Dish has covered a number of the critical details about the project, and I'm sure she'll have more to share. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Delacourt and Mr. Leonard and other planning staff for their extensive work on this really difficult site. What we have before us is a project that cleans up a polluted and blighted site in the 5th Ward and advances a number of our community priorities. Councilmember Dish mentioned many of them, but just to review, we're remediating the environmental contamination. We're adding affordable housing in addition to likely other housing on the site or funding for our affordable housing, protecting the chimney swift habitat, where it would be construction of a 15-wood wide-foot path with a tree-lined trail. So on and on, we are seeing improvements on this site. But I'd also like to thank the many residents who've reached out to me about this project, both in support and with concerns. The concerns, as we heard in public comment, primarily have centered around compatibility with the historic district and floodplain concerns. The HDC has reviewed and provided recommendations that have informed the supplemental regulations and concept plan, and they will need to approve the final plan. Early on, the floodplain issues were what gave me the most pause with this project, and that's why one of the first things that Councilmember Dish and I did after starting our terms was to sit down with numerous staff members from multiple specialty areas to discuss the trade-offs on this site. And Councilmember Dish noted sort of all the improvements that we're seeing in terms of floodplain management, so I'm not going to review those. The one thing that I do think is worth discussing a little bit more tonight is there's one piece that's missing from the supplemental regulations that is a community priority and a pretty critical community priority. So, and that is the alignment with any future development with our A20 plan. So, I'm looking at this through an environmental lens. Primarily, there's a lot of sites, a lot of issues that are going to be prioritized on this site, but fundamentally, we are seeking to clean up a environmentally contaminated site in the 5th Ward on a floodplain. What we put back there needs to be something that is not contributing to climate change, in my opinion, that is beneficial to the environment. So I'd like to put forward a motion, and that is to basically to direct staff to develop language for the supplemental regulations that advances our A20 green building sustainability goals and results in an energy efficient net zero building or net zero ready building. I can discuss more if there's a second to that.
Can you restate the exact text?
Sure. Yes. It's a motion to direct staff to develop language for the supplemental regulations that advances our A20 goals, our green building sustainability goals, and results in an energy efficient net zero building or net zero ready building. I think it's going to take some time to develop that language that can be presented to us by second reading. So this is basically asking them to develop that language between now and the second reading.
Seconded by Councilmember Rodina.
And I can go into it more.
On the amendment.
Yeah. So.
Ms. Boudry?
So you're not proposing
I'm
an
not
amendment to the ordinance?
I'm not.
Okay.
Nope.
So it's not an
So this isn't an
amendment.
amendment?
It's not an amendment. It's a motion to direct staff to bring forward language.
Doesn't that need to be added to the agenda separately as a separate?
I don't know.
That could result in an amendment.
Yes.
I checked in with.
Right. So this would be a separate motion, though, and I think the ordinance would have to be postponed if you want to keep the two distinct.
It sounds, let me suggest perhaps that what you're looking for is a postponement of the, no?
Okay, maybe I'll just use this as we can discuss if we, why don't I'll use my second speaking time in a moment to discuss this more and we can have a discussion around
All
it
right.
instead of a motion. How about we do that?
Sure. Anyone like to discuss the main motion prior to any change? Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. First off, I just wanted to recognize that I'm coming in at the end of what I have learned has been a years-long process to identify a solution for this blighted property in a flood zone. And I really appreciate the work of planning staff, planning commission, community members to identify a way forward. I think there's a lot of considerations with this project that don't make the decision necessarily a simple, easy, straightforward one, which probably explains why it has sat like it is for so long. So I just wanted to say a few words about the things that, the values that I'm thinking about as concerns the PUD before us. Number one, the creation of desperately needed housing for our city, including affordable housing. We're in a housing crisis. I plan to take every opportunity I can to address this issue by making sure that we add more housing where it makes sense. Two, as has been mentioned, the cleanup and toxic remediation of the site. We know this site is a brownfield containing toxic pollution and it is spreading under the street to the surrounding area. It needs to be cleaned up. So we don't want it to continue sitting in the state that it is. Three, that it's done responsibly and with climate change and community resilience in mind. As I said, this property is in a floodplain, something that several residents have reached out to us about. We know that we're experiencing more extreme weather-related events, such as flooding, and our community, in the greater state of Michigan is poised to be a climate refuge. And as spelled out in our A20 plan, we know that we need to build resilience to climate change, which is something that I really value. So when I grappled on this topic about whether this was environmentally sound or puts our community in danger, I was looking at, the plans that specifically dealt with this. And I think, as Councilmember Dish said, we need to recognize that what's being proposed is a vast improvement from a flooding perspective than what has been sitting there for decades. Also, the PUD turns the entire floodway into the tree line trail, which is a massive community benefit. Right now, it's covered by impervious surface. Second, the residential portion is in the flood fringe and would fully conform, or if I understand Mr. Delacourt's comments tonight, exceeds the recently adopted city ordinance that stipulates how residential developments can be built in our city today. Lastly, it's important that we have a way to pay for it. This is going to be expensive. Now we know it's going to be even more expensive if it's for simply just recreational use with no residential. This plan doesn't put the city on the line to pay for it. Again, something that has been sitting there for years with no solution. So those are the things that I'm thinking about as I consider this. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Dish.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Ackman and Councilmember Briggs. Those were both really eloquent comments. I did want to, again, address head-on the tension that people have raised between the aspirational document of our hazardous, hazard management plan and the strengthened floodplain ordinance. I want to say that the ordinance is and should be, not just that it is legally, but it should be the deciding standard. The ordinance provides guardrails for making prudent land use decisions in a context where we seek the best balance between stormwater management and other city priorities, such as Councilmember Ackman just mentioned, situating housing within walking distance of jobs and services. The floodplain concerns people have raised with respect to 415 West Washington aren't really about this site. They raise the broader question whether we trust the ordinance that floodplain staff has written and council passed just over 2 years ago. If we want to change the floodplain ordinance to match our aspirational goals for stormwater management, we can do that. But we need to ask ourselves how the urgent concern about housing supply in the city stacks up against an ideal standard of meeting our highest aspirations regarding structures in the flood fringe. And I will underscore what Councilmember Ackman just said, which is that if council opted to turn the property into a park or other without any residential use on it, the work of demolishing the structure, remediating the contamination to the highest level, and preserving the habitat would cost millions of dollars, for which we have no funding source other than the general fund, which is committed. Moreover, I would like to say that this process was designed to provide us with what staff considers to be a feasible project and a good balance among competing city priorities. We are often in the situation of leaving it up to the developer, who is an interested party, to give us their opinion on what can and can be done. In this case, staff from multiple departments have provided counsel, and they have reached agreement.
Mr. Delacourt. My sources tell me you had your hand up.
It was. I was going to offer that we had provided some language regarding the ability, and I know in conversations with Councilmember Briggs, her intent is not to amend the ordinance or delay this, but to add language that would add language to the supplemental regulations that would require at a minimum a net zero ready building. I think if that's a direction council wants to go in, if that's the language of the motion that's being proposed, that's something we can do and add into the supplemental regs prior to second reading.
So what I hear you saying is that you believe that staff can take general direction on this point and add something on its own lights to the supplemental regulation prior to second reading in a way that would not necessitate us either amending the ordinance as is or assuming city attorney's acquiescence, bring us back to a first reading.
Correct.
I don't know how to opine on it without seeing the language, but once I've
But
seen
he says it.
Or I can say if council wanted to amend the ordinance tonight, or amend the supplemental regulations, I should be careful, amend the supplemental regulations tonight to require that the proposals identify at a minimum a net zero ready building. I think that's possible.
Mr. Mayor.
So what I hear you, Mr. Delacorte, is that you believe you have language suitable for amending tonight that will achieve the goal, that would achieve the goal that Councilmember Briggs has expressed?
Well, I think if the desired standard is to amend the supplemental regulations in a manner that would require proposals to respond in a manner indicating that the building would be net zero ready, that is something that is acceptable to us.
So there is, you could provide that, if we broke for a bio break and reconvened at 9:10, we would have that language.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney.
I'm not opposite of where Mr. Delacorte is. I'm just a little confused about procedurally how we're trying to go about it. Staff does not have the authority to substitute its judgment for a sitting council member during a debate. So what has happened, Councilmember Briggs did not move to amend. She did not put forward a substitute motion. She's really calling for a separate action. Therefore, the motion on the floor has to be dealt with before we can get to, and the staff can't.
What I hear Mr. Delacorte saying is in accord with what you have observed. I hear Mr. Delacorte saying that he has listened to Councilmember Briggs. He believes that there is language on the ready, which, if implemented if proposed by Councilmember Briggs and seconded and approved by Council, would affect an amendment to the supplemental regulations in accordance with Councilmember Briggs and by extension, should it be, Council's instructions. And then we would have an amendment of the existing regulations. Mr. Delacorte would have been responsive to what he was hearing in the course of debate, and we would move forward as amended.
Could I pose a question?
Please.
So this is all absent review by the city attorney?
Yes, I would not have seen this language before.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just add, typically with, and of course I would defer to the city attorney, but I would just observe that whenever possible, we want consistency between our first reading and second reading. Part of the emphasis of that is to provide clear expectation of how an ordinance might be realized and to share that with publication. I would suggest that the proposed changes that Councilmember Briggs is requesting by resolution or otherwise, or Mr. Delacorte just asserting that we would be happy to follow up with that, would be adding additional restrictions to an ordinance that is on the plate for first reading. It would add potentially, at worst, more public benefit at second reading. So I would just observe that it might be feasible, from my opinion, to proceed with the first reading as it is, with the clear understanding that it might be amended for second reading with an additional public benefit adding, but with the full benefit that in its current form, you'd be sharing the opportunity for the public to review and provide comment in advance and at that public hearing in a month.
I'm actually in full agreement with Mr. Leonard. We could proceed with the ordinance as it is today. We could give staff direction to consider additional language, which could then be considered by the city attorney's office. It might, however, result in us recommending that we go back to first reading if we consider the amendment to be substantial enough. Or if it is not substantial, then we might proceed with the second reading. But I do want to highlight that it could result in a recommendation to go back to first reading.
Mr. Mayor.
This sounds like a postponement to me.
I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, by all means.
But what we have is an item on the floor that the full body is poised to take some action. We have staff that is amenable to addressing the desires of a single council member. We need a majority of council to indicate that they support what a single council member is asking for. It's not appropriate for staff to say we will acquiesce to what a single member is asking absent action taken by the body.
Certainly with respect to modifying the amendments modifying the supplemental regulations on its own light without council action intervening. If what I think I hear is that a amendment could be prepared in the intervening time, an amendment.
Okay.
Hearing the conversation, an amendment prepared in the intervening time, which would then be reviewed by city attorney for its first reading, second reading effect. We, assuming this passes, goes forward to second reading in the ordinary course, we would then, at this second reading, have an opportunity to reflect upon the wisdom or not of the amendment. If it has proposed and passes, then we would do so having a full understanding of whether it be first reading or second reading. Staff would have been responsive to the room, not changing the not actually changing the resolution, but rather offering an amendment for council's consideration at the next conversation.
I'm good.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does anybody else understand what I said? All right. So, Councilmember Briggs, what I hear, I have Cornell on the queue in the ordinary course, but we're just kind of floating on this a little bit. Does everybody kind of understand what's going on? Is everybody pretty cool with it? Yes. All right. Being cool with it, let's continue. Councilmember Cornell.
I don't know how to follow that up. I want to address some things that I had heard. Councilmember Briggs and I had our monthly coffee, or office hours, or however you want to phrase it, yesterday. And as you can imagine, this really dominated the conversation. And I wanted to make sure that I addressed some of what we heard. I heard, I should say, that this action feels rushed and sudden, which seems very confusing to me because although I'm new to council, this has been on my radar for years. As a Fourth Ward resident being invited to participate in public comment on it, there was a survey around it. I think that the city has done a lot of work around this property, and I really applaud city staff for sticking with it. So I want to highlight that again, that this is not something that is brand new and sprung up and, we're trying to rush. I think that it's been a very thoughtful process to date. I want to point out that there's been criticism of neighborhood character, talking about whether or not this should be a park. I think Councilmember Dish brought up some really important points that if the city opted to turn this property into a park, it would need to identify funding for the demolition of structures, the remediation of environmental contaminants, construction of the tree line trail, and preserving of the chimney for the birds, which would total millions of dollars that is unbudgeted from city funds. So truly we would need to rob Peter to pay Paul to accommodate some of these. And we know from our pros plan that the city does have an ambitious parks and recreation plan, and funding has been thoughtfully dedicated toward those priorities that were informed by the community at large. I think that's a really important point to this. I think it's also noteworthy that, our partner in this, the tree line trail, has also identified that there is no available city funding for this type of project in terms of creating recreational space on this site, and that creating and funding its perpetual maintenance is beyond the scope of Tree Line's mission. So again, this becomes the city's responsibility. The other thing that I want to point out is that when we talk about brownfield credits, there's been a lot of talk about the city assuming responsibility for this, cleaning things up. That is exactly what this tax increment funding is there for.
This TIF capture is tax dollars that the state returns to local governments in order to advance important projects within the communities. This is exactly what this tax credit is designed for. It is a common economic development tool. It is not one that's being pulled out of a magic bag to pay for this. We see it in terms of our own funding. TIF funding is used for Ann Arbor Spark activity. It's used for DDA activity. This is not new here in the city, nor is it new anywhere in the United States in terms of it being an economic development tool. I think that this site is walkable. Obviously, I walk through the site every day on my way to work. It is walkable. It's close to town and transit, and I think that this would be a highly desirable property for a developer to acquire. I'm interested in hearing feedback from colleagues on the sustainability aspects of this property development. I think if this is one we're going to swing for the fences, it's the opportunity to do so. And I think that the plans that the city has put forth right now in order to do this check so many of those boxes and is already quite ambitious. I already mentioned the chimney swifts, the tree line trail, developing a new West Washington streetscape, which I think is really important. And it also provides setbacks that are greater than what is required, increases our flood storage capacity in the floodplain. That was some around the flooding issues and safety. That was a lot of feedback that we have heard consistently. And it reduces the impervious surfaces on that floodplain while reducing the building coverage in that floodplain. So I'm supportive of this.
Further discussion? Councilmember Briggs.
All right, sorry for that procedural nightmare for a little bit. To go back to the sustainability component, so the supplemental regulations are the guidelines that we're going to be going out to the development community and asking, they're sort of the guardrails for this project. What do we want to see come back to us? And so if we don't have anything in there that says that we want to have a building that complies with our A20 plan, it's unlikely that a developer is going to bring that back to us. So this is something that planning staff, in terms of our conversations today, it's clear that it's going to take a little bit of time to create that that language that is something that everybody can kind of is appropriate from the legal department's perspective, appropriate from planning department's perspective. So I welcome people's feedback on this in terms of their support, and I think that's what staff is also looking for, is a little bit of feedback on that to make sure this is not just me. I know Councilmember Cornell and I have had conversations around this, and I think we're fairly in alignment on this. I am looking at what we're doing on other city-owned sites, our affordable housing, where we're maximizing affordable housing. Those are all the 121 East Catherine that we approved the transfer of ownership to the Ann Arbor Housing Development Corporation. It's going to be going to Planning Commission tomorrow, and the language in that is extensive on it being a net zero ready building, and discusses many energy efficiency elements that we expect to see as a part of that project. And so I think there are sort of expectations about what we want to see out of a building, out of a PUD in our city. So I know from my perspective, that's really important when we eventually get a development back to us, that it is in alignment with what voters have approved through our climate millage. It's in alignment with our A20 plan. So, I think it's, in terms of the language that was suggested here, in terms of amending the regulations, I would have supported that tonight. I think that's essentially the intent, is to at least have an A20 ready building, if not more. This is a site that's in the floodplain, obviously. Having features that eliminate runoff, water runoff on the building, like a green roof, are also obviously important elements in a project like this. In terms of the specificity, obviously, we don't have a developer at the table yet, so it's very difficult to outline we want X, Y, and Z out of this. But I do think that I hope that we're all in agreement in terms of the types of building that we would want to see built on this site, in terms of general direction that we would want a developer to come back to us with.
Further discussion? I'm excited that this is moving forward. This, of course, has been a difficult site for many, many years. And this is an opportunity for us to make it something useful and attractive and beneficial, and incredibly helpful to many members of our community, both current and new. Because we all know that we are in a housing crisis, and we do need housing. We also know that we want to give the tree line a boost, and this would accomplish that goal, and it would, of course, affect a cleanup for an area that is in desperately need of it. And the eyesore of the current condition simply can't be overstated as well. So this is an excellent opportunity, I believe, and I'm excited that it's moving forward and look forward to second reading. Got Councilmember Cornell, then Ackman.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that we had heard earlier that this, sort of supplemental in terms of looking at directing green building and making this AT0 compliant was characterized as one city council member, and I have had numerous conversations with Councilmember Briggs as this property is in our ward, and I do support that as well, and I welcome our colleagues' feedback on ideally what we'd like to see in terms of advancing our carbon neutrality goals on this site.
Councilmember Ackman.
I'm also supportive of adding sustainability measures to this building, something that we hear about with almost every development that comes up. I think it came up at least twice in the last meeting, and so I think we should be taking opportunities where we can to advance the values of our community. Thanks.
Further discussion? Mr. Delacourt, did I see your hand flash?
Yeah, you did briefly, Mayor. I was just going to add, we understood that the previous conversation was an acquiescence on staff to put it in the regulations, only to draft the appropriate amendment for consideration at a future date.
Perfect. Councilmember Song, my apologies.
I just want to quickly add that this project has come up before HHSAB, the Housing and Human Services Administration Advisory Board. Thank you. Before, it's been in discussion for over a year now, and I know the committee members would be really pleased to see this passed. So just a reminder that we do have folks in community who've looked at this and are following this and would be excited for good news.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. C2, C2, an ordinance to amend section 8527 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 Building Regulations of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Cornell, seconded by Councilmember Bardino. Discussion, please, of C2. Councilmember Cornell.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I'm excited to bring this ordinance forward for consideration by my colleagues. I want to thank Councilmember Medina, Council members Ackman, Ghazi Edwin, and Harrison for also being informative and helpful in bringing this to the table. I also want to thank the Renters Commission, who offered really valuable insight and feedback on this when it was taken to them for their input. Basically, what this ordinance does is amend the housing code within the city to require rental units, residential rental units, to have a carbon monoxide detector. It's currently not part of existing rental units, so the state does require, if you are building a new rental unit, that you do have to have carbon monoxide detectors, but as we know, there are a lot of existing and much older units here in Ann Arbor for which that does not apply. So this would, very similar to what is required for smoke detectors in Ann Arbor. It's another level of safety and security for residents here. The one thing that I did want to point out to my colleagues is that we received later this afternoon, a substitute amendment. The change in this, just so that you know, is that it was pointed out that some boilers and furnaces in multifamily dwellings, so 3 or more apartments, have heating systems that are not contained within the dwelling specifically. And so under the initial version of this ordinance, those units would have been exempt from having CO2 detection because they do not have fuel-fired appliances within the unit. So this covers that gap to make sure that it is inclusive of all different types of rental housing in the city requiring carbon monoxide detection units. The other thing that is really important, I think, to point out here is that the the maintenance and the ongoing assurance of safety within these CO detectors is the landlord's responsibility or the building owner's responsibility. So I think that this is a really strong step forward in terms of making sure that our renters are safe and that they aren't at risk of CO poisoning. So I would welcome everyone's support for this ordinance.
May I infer an amendment to substitute for the substitute resolution? Seconded by Councilmember Medina. Discussion? I assume that's friendly to the body? Excellent. Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Medina.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, and I just want to thank Councilmember Cornell and Attorney Reiser for all of their work on this. I know that this is one of the first issues that Councilmember Cornell started working on when she joined this body, and I know it's been a heavy lift as they've been working through and making sure they were engaging with all the stakeholders. I know Renters Commission was incredibly supportive, as was mentioned, when they were brought on board, and so I just want to thank everybody who put some work into this with us and fully support it and think that it will move us towards safer rental units throughout the city.
Further discussion? Councilmember Ackman.
Wanted to also voice my thanks for Councilmember Cornell's work on this. This was an issue I actually heard about over the summer when I was knocking on doors, oddly enough, from a landlord who was mystified as to why the city required smoke detectors but not carbon monoxide detectors. So I really appreciate this move to improving safety for tenants, and I look forward to the day that most of us aren't heating our homes or bringing fossil fuels into our homes, and we don't have to worry about this anymore.
Further discussion? Councilor Brisson.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but can we clarify that if there is no detector, that the misdemeanor would be attributed to the owner versus the resident or the renter
Ms.
if they're
Clark?
out of compliance?
Could I please ask Mr. Reiser to answer?
Mr. Reiser?
The misdemeanor is associated with intentionally disabling or rendering it inoperable. So if there's not one there, that will be a civil infraction. That would also be caught at an inspection by the rental housing. So if there isn't one there, it could be a civil infraction, and they'll be ordered to get it as part of the follow-up on the inspection.
But I do think it's correct that it's an infraction for the owner and not the renter.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC1, resolution to approve Katie Laramie to the Greenbelt Advisory Commission, moved by Councilmember Medina, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Discussion, please, of DC1. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved with 11 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 7-vote requirement. DC2, resolution to request the Ann Arbor Public Art Commission to establish a project plan to redesign the City of Ann Arbor city flag in honor of the 2024 bicentennial celebration, moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Harrison. Discussion, please, of D2. For my part, I'm incredibly excited about bringing this forward. As we all know, civic flags, municipal flags can be an incredibly important part of and component of civic pride. We also know that that really isn't the case here in Ann Arbor, in part, I believe, because the design of the current city flag does not meet proper vexillological principles. That is to say, simplicity of design, use of symbolism that is meaningful, two or three basic colors, no lettering or seals, and distinctiveness or relatedness if it's appropriate in the context. Municipal flags can be an important part of community cohesion, building enthusiasm for the municipality, infusing civic pride, and it's something that I'm excited that we'll have the opportunity perhaps to bring forward in connection with the city's bicentennial in 2024. For folks that have seen the reference in the agenda and with respect to the resolution, I'd encourage folks to check out the Good Flag, Bad Flag flyer, and folks who are interested in, since I have the floor, talking about one of my favorite podcasts, 99% Invisible, which Roman Mars talks a fair bit in the TED Talk and in a particular episode about the importance of city flags, their principles, their design, and their opportunities. So I'm excited about this. And I'm particularly glad that the Public Art Commission is interested in shepherding this conversation. They've done and had great success over the course of years with having community design projects for public art that has been important to the fabric of the community. I'm thinking with particularity at least of the Manchester Water Tower, and I'm hopeful that this can prove a similar and even greater success. Further discussion. Councilmember Song.
I'm really curious if we can come up with something as strongly identifiable as the University of Michigan's logo. I think many of us, wherever we travel, we hear folks say, "Go Blue," if you have that logo on you, on your body in some fashion. And it'd be interesting to see if we can evoke that kind of same kind of enthusiasm, recognition, and familiarity with whatever comes out of this process. So I'm excited, and I hope also youth can be involved. It'd be really interesting to see what their perspective is and how they envision the city. So thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC3, resolution to approve a general services agreement between Waste Management of Michigan, Inc. and the City of Ann Arbor for commercial solid waste franchise collection. Estimated cost for the city, $733,000. Total estimated contract value, $14,660,000. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion, please, of DC3. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC4, resolution directing the city administrator to provide city council a monthly risk fund claims review report. Moved by Councilmember Ackman, second by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of DC4. Councilmember Ackman.
Thank you. So this is a follow-on to the ordinance change that we made earlier. Just reiterate that the reason why I brought this forward with my colleagues was because we would like to maintain some insight into the claims that are being paid. And in particular, I think knowing what kinds of issues that people are running into in the city is important. I think on our last agenda, we had a claim that resulted, that was the context of which, had a missing sidewalk and a hole in a road. And personally, I think that is useful to know as a policymaker, the things that are going on in the city. So this resolution asks for us to get basic information about the risk fund claims reported to us on a monthly basis, which it is now through the meeting minutes. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about it.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I did have an amendment I wanted to introduce, and Clerk Beaudry is circulating it right now, I think. But the gist of it, it's very simple, and simply says, resolved that the monthly risk fund claims review report will also be posted to a dedicated page on the city's website, which I have spoken with our city administrator about, and he has assured us that there's no issue with that. This
is there a second? Second by Councilor Ackman.
Thanks. And the purpose of this is simply to make it easier for residents to find this report. So in addition to it being attached to our agendas in Legistar, there'll be a dedicated place on the website where people can and we as well can easily go look at it at any time. So just provides an increased measure of transparency over the previous system.
Is that friendly to the body? Super. Further discussion of the main motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DB1, resolution requesting the city administrator to engage with the Michigan Legislature and Michigan Public Service Commission to advance energy, equity, and resilience. Moved by Councilmember Ghazi Edwin, second by Councilmember Udina. Discussion, please, at DB1. Councilmember Ghazi Edwin.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I want to thank you. I want to thank Councilmember Radina, Councilmember Briggs for helping to take this to the Energy Commission. I think they gave really important input and really meaningful input as well regarding a variety of different things that I'm going to allow you to share in a little bit. Unfortunately, we did not have the time to have legal review this. And what we're asking in this resolution and the input that the Energy Commission gave really strengthens it, and it's important. And it's important that we get it right. So I would like to make a motion to postpone this resolution to our April 3rd meeting so that legal has some time to review it.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion of the postponement. All in favor? Opposed? It is postponed. Ms. Court, we have the pleasure of a closed session today.
Unfortunately not.
Tis pity. We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Watson, second by Councilmember Dish. Discussion, please, of the clerk's report. All in favor? Opposed? The clerk's report is approved. Are there communications today from our city attorney? There is no public comment overflow today, and so may I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Harrison, second by Councilmember Dish. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.